Welcome to Entrepreneurs, Executives, and Eccentrics, a podcast dedicated to the stories, strategies, and secrets of remarkable individuals. Join us as we engage in enlightening conversations with intriguing entrepreneurs, accomplished executives, and fascinating eccentrics, exploring their journeys, triumphs, and the unconventional wisdom that has shaped their success. In this episode, we talk with Pete O'Hearn, founder and CEO of FibroBiologics, a cell therapy company developing fibroblast-based treatments for chronic disease. We explore his path from hospital administration to medical devices, music, mining, and biotechnology, and how he approaches building businesses in unfamiliar industries. Pete shares why he believes everyone is in sales, how he evaluates opportunities, and the simple principles that have guided his career across multiple ventures.
Hello, Pete. Tell me who you are and what you do.
I am a founder and CEO of FibroBiologics. We are a cell therapy company working with fibroblast cells on therapeutic use to treat chronic diseases. So they're very similar to stem cells, yet they outperform stem cells. So we're in kind of a new cell source with these. So we are developing fibroblasts for therapeutic use.
Now, was this particular company are you founding member of this company?
I'm the founder. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I mean, because the things you're describing, it's just, how do you come to the thesis, right? Are you sitting I just imagine you're sitting somewhere, you're like, what if I took fiber? How does one go from idea to something like this?
Well, actually, I had a previous company where we designed a set of surgical instruments that I had taken to every venture capitalist in the country and said, look at us, we designed the best instrument system in the world. And all 150 of them said, no, you didn't. And with 25 patents later, we returned 950% to our shareholders and created 13 new millionaires. And I went back to those venture capitalists and I thanked them for their guidance, told them what we had done. And they all said, we're check writers, whatever you do in the future. And I said, well, we just deal with individual angel investors and surgeons. And then one venture capitalist called and said, listen, my brother is a French neurosurgeon, his wife's a French dermatologist. And if you know how we treat foreign trained doctors, we ask them to serve a residency all over again. So that's a tall hill to climb for a board certified neurosurgeon on the Champs-Élysées in Paris for 15 years when they come over here to tell them they have to go back and serve a residency. So they become great inventors. And they had this idea that you could take a dermal fibroblast, a skin cell, and if you inject it into the disc in the spine, the intermittent hydrostatic pressure, that the force above and below that disc would force the fibroblast cells, the skin cells, to turn into chondrocyte or cartilage cells, and you could regrow the disc. And so everything that I had kind of worked on in the past were improved technologies, but this one, if it worked, was a game changer. So we acquired their provisional patent. And since that time, I have organically written over 450 patents in this space.
There's a guy named Mike Maples Jr. He's private equity. He was one of the original, I believe he's one of the original guys from Twitter, or there's founders of Facebook, on and on and on, right? And he talks about how private equity, there's a secret. Typically, the private equity and the founder have a secret that only they know the future. No one else sees that quite yet. And the more correct they are about that secret, right, the more successful they are. And it sounds like PE didn't see your secret. They didn't understand it.
Well, we went down the path. We thought we were just going to be a spine company. And then I started challenging our scientists to explore everything related to fibroblasts. And that's where the explosion happened. And I like to say, if I live 3 more lifetimes, I won't find an area more unpatented than the therapeutic use of fibroblasts. The interesting thing about these is that the reason that we know about stem cells, our theory is that the capital flow into that area happens after a big event. Like Dr. Yamanaka won the Nobel Prize in 2012 for the first induced pluripotent stem cell. That is to take one cell type and turn it into another. The irony is that he used a fibroblast, our cell, to create the stem cell. So the entire stem cell revolution began with our fibroblast cell. And to us, it's like you send out back in the old days when we used to send out singles in the music business, sometimes the B side was better than the A side. Flip it over, Bohemian Rhapsody was on the B side. That was the hit. Well, Fibroblast was the real hit. That was the real story. And they're more stable than stem cells. Stem cells are inherently unstable. Fibroblasts are very stable. They're easier to grow and harvest, and they're easier to ship, and they just have higher immune modulation properties, and they're higher therapeutic values. So just a better cell source than stem cells. It's just nobody knows about them. So there's only two cells that you can use in regenerative medicine to cure chronic disease and regenerate tissue. There's a stem cell that everybody's heard about, and there's a fibroblast that nobody's heard about.
No one's heard about.
But the fibroblast is the most common cell in the human body. They outnumber stem cells 5,000 to 1. And to tell you how little people know, these are skin cells. So when you cut your skin, the regeneration of that skin is fibroblasts. We presented about 6 months ago to a professor of dermatology at a medical school. And after 45 minutes, he said, guys, I have been teaching fibroblasts for the last 20 years, and I had no idea that this was possible. That's a guy that teaches fibroblasts.
I'm looking through your education, and nowhere do I see microbiologists. Nowhere do I say. I'm just saying. I'm like, oh, he's clearly got a PhD in such things, right? And that isn't the case at all. Again, how the hell did you do this?
Well, I was actually pre-med. I had a fascination with biology since my first memory, so I was always going to go into medicine. But I'm going to date myself. I walked into my biology class in college. And back then, if you had a 3.5 and above, you could get into American medical schools. 3.5 and between 3 and 3.5, you had to go to the Caribbean. That was your plan B. And so the professor walked in and said, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you plan B was Grenada? And half the class raised the hand. And he said, President Reagan just invaded Grenada today. You need to move on to plan C. So I said, no problem. I'm a biologist. Let me go see what. And so I went to the job board at it was Texas State. Went to the job board and it said Texas Parks and Wildlife biologist. And I said, I'm home. This is where I'm going. Annual salary, $11,000 a year. And I said, wow, I don't know what it takes to raise a family of 4, but I think it's more than $11,000 a year. So I did what any Texan does. I grabbed a 12-pack of beer, went to my buddy's place, and we floated in the pool to try to find me a new major. And another buddy showed up, and he yelled over the fence, said, what are you guys doing? And my friend Robbie said, we're trying to find Pete a new major. And he said, how about hospital administration? And I didn't know I had no idea there was a degree path for that. And from that point on, I was a hospital administrator. I found my home. I loved it. Had the biology side of it, but it had the business aspect too. So that's how I ended up in hospital administration.
In 1992, if you could spell SAT, you could get into University of Texas. Okay, I'm just saying, there was no, I mean, it wasn't, the bar was today it's so elite, 1470 and you didn't cure cancer before the age of 18, you're not going to get into whatever. It is so competitive now that I think that, I'm a little bit younger than you, but I don't think by much. And I think that it just gets more and more competitive. The world is just getting bonkers. Now you keep music. Now I did some research. You keep mentioning music. Did you leave a music career before you started this career? Did I miss a disconnect?
So after our first company we sold, they put me on a 2-year non-compete. So I was sitting around and I was always the music guy growing up. So, I was the one trying to turn everyone. I brought the Van Halen album to school in 7th grade and said, y'all need to be paying attention to Van Halen back then.
Well, which was it? Was it Diver Down or was it which
the first one, Van Halen? The very first one,
right?
Yeah. So it was, and they were all like, it was kind of dangerous cover, it was blurry and psychedelic, and everyone stayed away from it. And then about 6 weeks later, Van Halen was the biggest band, and everybody was loving it. And I had moved on to another band. I was a little bit of a music obscurist. Once everyone else jumped on board,
not good enough for you're a hipsters before hipsters was a hipster. Yeah,
had to go find the next.
I saw Van Halen, by the way, in the Astrodome when I was like 15 or 16
I
years
saw
old.
them in Texas. I think they were in Texas Jam. Yeah, I've been to every every concert multiple times. Even the old Summit in Houston, I went to that
Oh, yeah.
almost on a weekly basis. But they put me on a non-compete, and there was an artist here in Houston that was fantastic and won a singing contest. And I went to her mother and said, "Hey, I have no idea what I'm saying, but I think it sounds cool when I say it. Do you want to go to Nashville and cut a demo?" And she said, "Yes. What does that entail?" I said, "I have absolutely no idea."
Let's go find out together.
So we'll go find out together. And so I had a independent record label in Nashville for almost 15 years on Music Row.
I love the confidence of a serial killer. You're like, I don't know what that is, but I'll go do it. Like, I don't know exactly. Like, I don't know exactly what that entails, but I feel confident I can go figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's the missing ingredient between winners and not. Is that unfounded unbelief in yourself that, you're like, I'll figure this the hell out eventually.
Well, we had developed some pretty good music. Our artist, she ended up being a fantastic, literally a generational songwriter. Put together enough music, so I started calling around to attorneys there in Nashville Music Row because I knew we were going to need a music lawyer. I mean, I didn't know anything about music law. And every one of them virtually hung up on me and said, "We don't pitch artists." I'm like, I kept going, "What are y'all talking about pitching art?" I didn't even know what they were talking about. I just know we're going to need documents that secure the music and secure, the royalties and all that. I'm just trying to get someone who's experienced. And they would all say, "Sorry, we're not interested. We don't pitch artists." And I kept going, I've never seen an attorney turn down business. And I ended up with actually Faith Hill and Aaron Neville's attorney. He was in there in Nashville, and he said the same thing. "I don't pitch artists." And I kept going, I hear that from everyone. What does that mean? And he said, "Well, come to my conference room." And so he went through the whole thing. "Listen, I'm an attorney. I don't pitch artists. But listen." And I kept saying, "Well, I think we need documents. I'm sure we do." And he said, "Well, let me hear the music." And so we played it for him. And he said, "I'm all in. Here's what we do." He said, "We go pitch her to all the majors."
It turns out I pitch artists. Is that what
I don't pitch artists, but as soon as he heard the
Yeah.
music, he said, "Here's what we do.
Right.
We go pitch the artist.
Right.
We go pitch her to the majors." And he said, "We get a record deal." And I said, "That's the easiest thing I ever did. Fine, my work here's done." I said, "What happens after that?" He said, "They put her on the bench, and when one of the A-listers falters, she's in the game." Done. "How long is that bench? How long is that?" He said, "Well, I have an artist on the bench now for 8 years. She's cleaning hotel rooms waiting for a shot. She's signed to a major label, and she's cleaning hotel rooms for 8 years." And I said, "Well, we don't want to wait 8 years." And he said, "Well, then you can start your own label. You could be the first of the indies out there." And so so we started the label.
God, okay. So you do this for a minute. So you've got 2 years of downtime, which is kind of like a really polite way of saying I had a slight exit, right? I had a waiting exit for them to go clean out some IP probably, or whatever it was. You literally just never done this thing. Let's go do the thing, right? I'm just going to learn it as we go, right? So what happens after? So now you've done that for a while. What is the next company? Because at some point, you and I have a disease. We get bored. I think if we go found companies, it's the problem. And I think I've seen this pattern before.
Yeah. So in the background, I was working on that cell therapy technology. So I had placed the proof of concept with Rush University. And so it took a couple of years to get that up and going, and they had to build this device that would mimic the forces of the spine. And the professor called me on a Sunday afternoon. I was as surprised that it was a professor working on a Sunday afternoon as I was that the results worked the first time. He said, "Pete, it works." He said, "These cells turn from fibroblasts into chondrocytes. It's worked the first time. It's worked every time." He said, "You guys really have something here." And so he published his findings, and Dr. Howard Ahn at Rush University in Chicago saw that. And he was kind of the first stop for all the companies developing new spine technologies. They would go into Dr. Ahn. And he said, "I believe the future of the world is biologics. It can no longer be hardware. They want us to put hardware in our patients. They view us as carpenters, but it has to be biologics. And I think you guys have found the solution. So I'd like to do your animal trials." So while I had the record label going under the non-compete, we were also advancing that technology. kind of in the background. And he did his animal trials. He had 100% success rate. And we were off and running with Fibroblasts. And this
Have you ever
was
heard,
2
have you ever
years
heard of
before the
100%
Nobel Prize.
anything? Yeah. Like you've never heard of 100% of anything. You had 100% success rate?
100% success rate on those animals. And it was funny because he said, why don't you come to the North American Spine Conference with me? And I want to kind of show you around and show this technology around. And we get ready to walk in the exhibit hall. And he said, just know that when we walk through those doors, the entire world sees me as a carpenter. All I want to talk about is biologic solutions. All they want to talk about is more hardware. We walk through the doors and like on cue, and walking through there with Dr. On is like walking the Vegas Strip with Elvis. I mean, he is that guy. And so we walk through the doors and this guy comes up. He's like, Dr. On, come to our booth. I want to show you we've reduced the profile of the hexagonal screw by 1/32 of an inch. And he just turned to me and crossed his eyes and said, see, this is what they want to do. So all he wanted to do was talk about our technology.
Okay, so you're like, oh, let's go change the world while I'm doing this little record detail. I mean, it's just your casual nature is blowing my mind a little bit. I mean, I've met some interesting humans, but typically it's I guess General Petraeus was actually very casual about it too. He's like, well, we were parachuting into Baghdad, and it was this very kind of nonchalantness, right? Okay, so at some point you get into uranium. How does the uranium and metals like? Where does that inject? It's like brand new life.
Well, there was this mineral deposit in Alaska that I started reading about. Really the highest concentration of minerals that we know about in the Western Hemisphere. And this company had acquired, it's a caldera, which is a volcano that kind of collapses. And so there's a company that owned the middle part of it called Northern Dynasty. And there's a company that owned kind of the ring around it, which was Liberty Star. And so I bought stock in Liberty Star and I started watching that stock decline. And I'm just a shareholder at the time. And I kept telling my father-in-law, hey, this is really going to be interesting, this mineral deposit. And he said, you're a real investor when you've lost money in a gold mine. So good luck with that. Well, National Geographic comes out with an entire issue on this mineral deposit. So it's quite substantial, but they're just having trouble getting it through the EPA and through the various administrations. And so, but I called the CEO and I said, why is the stock going down? We're sitting on 900 claims. And he said, well, we have some toxic lenders out of New York and they're just diluting us and we can't do anything about it. And I said, well, why don't you go to Northern Dynasty? They're a neighbor. He said, well, I don't know anything about them. I said, well, they're your neighbor. We should know their birthdays, their cell phone numbers, their wives' interests. What are you talking about? It's not, I mean, in the mining business, you don't have a competitor. You're both pulling the same thing out of the ground. You both have about the same cost. It's a commodity that goes into the market. So it's literally an injection into the economic system with new assets. So there's not really a competitor like you might see in high tech. So I said, do you mind if I call him? And he said, well, good luck. So I called through the operator at Northern Dynasty. At that time, they were a multi-billion-dollar company. And I told him I'd like to speak to the CEO. And she said, well, you can't. He's playing golf at Pebble Beach. And I said, I need to speak to him probably in the next 20 minutes. I mean, we were broke. And I said, it's of the utmost urgency. And within 20 minutes, I was on the phone with the CEO of Northern Dynasty. And we structured a $10 million deal while he's on the golf course. I said, we need some cash infusion. You guys need a place to put your tailings. Why don't we carve out the 45 acres for you? And so we put that deal together and he kept saying, who are you? And I said, I'm just a shareholder. I'm not even on the board. And so from that point, they put me on the board and we were off to the races in a mining company.
You know what I find interesting? I find interesting that, so I'm of the belief that even the CEO of a company is in sales. So I believe everybody at almost every level is in sales. I get the feeling you also feel that way. You should know his birthday. You should know everything. Where the hell is this coming? Where does this philosophy come from? It's absolutely true, and I completely concur with you. But it took me 10 years of getting my ass kicked to realize everybody's in sales, right? How did you learn this?
I tell my children that, my kids just heard around the table when they were growing up, all they heard is medicine. My wife is a nurse and I'm a hospital administrator. So all they heard about was medicine, and they all went into computers, and they all told me, all three of them, that they don't want to be in sales. And I said, you're in sales. Everyone's in sales. If you,
Exactly right.
code a new program, you have to sell it to your boss or your coworker. I mean, there's sales, right? You can't just take a program and throw it out to the universe. You've got to go tell someone how to use it. You got to have to tell them the merits of that program. And so I told all of them, everyone's in sales. Truly, even if your audience is internal to your company, you're still selling to that audience. So the people that kind of look down their nose at, I don't want to be in sales because I'm an engineer, you're selling whatever you engineered, you've got to sell back to your company. So everyone's in sales.
I mean, I'm looking through your career, and so typically when you're an entrepreneur, you found a company, you're constantly chasing product market fit, right? Which is the service you provide at a price people willing to pay, and then it's profitable, right? But I'm looking through your career, and almost everything you've done was almost an obvious home run, meaning that product market fit, it was already obvious there was need for all these things. You weren't really having to go make an audience. They already existed. In fact, you had to grab the back of their head and go, look at this. That's it. Right there. And then you were off to the races.
When I left the hospital business, I went with a group of surgeons to build the first ice hockey arena in Houston. So there wasn't an obvious market for that. But when we opened the doors, the line was out to the freeway and down the feeder road. We sold $75,000 worth of product in our pro shop, which was about the size of a bedroom closet, in one day. And since we started hockey, I think the arena ended up sending almost 8 or 9 kids to college, having learned to skate, learned hockey there, and then went on to college. And we started Texas high school ice hockey. All of that started from that. And then I was 31 at the time, I believe, 32. And everyone that was doing public skate, if the kids would fall, their parents would call and threaten to sue us because they fell on the ice. And our insurance company at the time was settling every claim for $25,000. And I kept telling them, stop settling these claims. They're literally back skating the next day. And you're giving them $25,000. The word is getting around that this is how you fund your college education, by coming and skating at Texas Ice Stadium and falling in. And the insurance will just write you a $25,000 check. So I started looking around saying, what can we do legislatively? So I worked with the lobbyist, and we wrote and passed the first tort reform legislation for an ice hockey arena in the country. So if you slip and fall on an ice hockey arena in Texas, you can't sue.
College Station. I just looked it up. Gallery was the only ice rink I even knew, and I'm like, oh, it's in College Station. Is that right?
No. It's here in Houston. It's right by, north of Baybrook Mall and Clear Lake. It's now a car dealership collision center. So it lasted a number of years. I built it in 96, and then I sold my piece of it in 98. When I was there, an individual showed up with a surgical instrument, and I was knee deep in the arena building the ice hockey, bringing the floor up so we could freeze it. And he was standing on the side, and he said, I have this instrument, and I was out playing golf with some doctors and told him I was out of money. And they said, go see Pete. He's building an ice hockey arena. And if he likes it, he can, get you down the road with it. And I loved the idea. And so I sold my part of the ice arena and was back in medicine, but I was on the development side. And that was my true passion. I was home at that point, because it really is a, kind of a blank playing field, and you were rewarded by how hard you worked instead of some corporate structure. So that's really what started it all.
Where did you make your very first dollar that was truly an entrepreneurial endeavor? This was line in the sand, that dollar existed because I did something, right? What was that dollar?
Well, I've worked since I was 13 years old. So I used to do a lot of work for my uncle who had rent houses, and we would go around and fix those rent houses up. And so that was really kind of my first taste. And then my first real W-2 job was slinging pizzas at Mr. Gaddy's when I was a freshman in high school. So back then you worked and played sports. Now you can't do both. You just play sports or you work. But back then we did both of that. So I'd go to school, I'd run over there and sling pizzas until 10 o'clock at night, go home, wake up, go to basketball practice, and do it all over again every day.
Work ethic is the key. I mean, if you could give any entrepreneur kind of like some, you know, what's your code? Like I find that a lot of people in your position have a code and kind of a rule set that they follow. I never go after a deal like this. I never deal with someone like that. What is your, generally speaking, kind of code of entrepreneurship?
Kind of really my mantra is just progress the ball 5 yards a day. You don't have to go into work today to hit a grand slam home run. You may occasionally do that, but if you just go in and move the ball down the field 5 yards a day, you're ahead of 99.9% of the people, as long as you have forward motion and you accomplish something every day. It doesn't have to be big. It can be small, but don't waste a day. And on projects, I preach this, shave hours. Because if you have a project that's going to take a year and someone tells you they're going to deliver you a component of that project on Thursday afternoon, ask for it on Wednesday morning. Do it every single time, and you will shave days, weeks, and months off your project timeline. So don't ever let a day go by that you haven't moved that forward, and always shave hours. It will catch up to you, I promise you. So if you have a critical decision you have to make on a component of a project, and they suggest let's have a meeting Wednesday afternoon at 3. Well, nothing's going to happen that day, because at 3 after the meeting, everybody leaves. I say, I'm busy at 3. Can we do it at 10 a.m.? Because then the results from that meeting can be accomplished the rest of that day. So you've shaved hours off that day. And if you do enough of that, you condense the timeline.
This is a purely selfish question, only because my son just got into college. He just got into the University of Florida. We found out Friday. If you started over today, you have a little bit of understanding of the past. You still have all that in your head. What does the future look like? Where do you go? The advent of AI is kind of spooking everybody, and the entire. I'll give you an example. I don't think contract lawyers will have a job in another year with the way things are going. What do you do?
I don't know that I would change anything, because I wouldn't have gotten here if I didn't go on this pathway, and I wouldn't have known all of the. You do need that basis of knowledge, and I like to say, as a hospital, when you're trained as a hospital administrator, my graduate and undergraduate are both in that. When you're trained as a hospital administrator, you can do anything. It's literally the closest thing to political office on the business side, and so you can negotiate contracts, you can buy professional office buildings, you can go into surgery, whether you understand the biology side of medicine, or you should understand the biology side of medicine. And so you're talking to a pretty diverse group. You're working with your employees at the hospital, but you're also working with highly intellectual surgeons, big egos, rightfully so, big egos. So you're well trained for anything. So I just think hospital administration is probably the best training background for any career out there.
Yeah, because it's you have the kung fu is management, it's understanding of budget, it's understanding of people, egos, how everybody interacts. It's also, it sounds like real estate, it sounds like contractual problems, sounds like all the things. It's the closest. It's actually like two CEO, but it's like a CEO and a COO put in one position.
Very much so, absolutely. And you're dealing with a nurse, you're dealing with a maintenance worker, you're dealing with an HR person. All of these people have divergent interests. All of them have divergent backgrounds, divergent educational backgrounds. And then you're dealing with a neurosurgeon who, thinks that they're saving the world, and they are. I mean, you don't want to not neurosurgeon who lacks confidence. I promise you. I don't know. Where you're going to go into brain surgery. I hope we're going to do good in there.
I'm going to wing it.
You want the guy that said you got the best, and that's me. So you might have trouble with another surgeon, but you're not going to have trouble with me. That's the guy you want.
You definitely want a fighter pilot, right? In terms of the confidence of a serial killer, running that particular.
And what you end up with those guys that I found is that surgeons are natural inventors. Every day they go into surgery, they see a better way to do something. And so a lot of them have the resources to invent a product, to actually prototype the product, and some of them can use it in their hospitals and surgery, and then they kind of just stop. They don't know where to go from there because they're a practicing surgeon. So they're really great inventors, and you get a lot of great ideas from those guys. So when we were designing our surgical instruments, we designed it with one doctor, and then we broadened it out to a group of doctors in that same hospital. And, you keep tweaking the instrument, and then you say, we really have something. Then you expand it beyond the walls of that hospital, and all of your weak spots show up. So you're back to the drawing board, you fix all that. Then you really have something. You have it patented. And then we sold it in 4 different geographic areas. We sold in the Seattle market, San Diego market, Miami, Houston. And then we waited for reorders because anybody can sell something once, but can you get a reorder? This is something people want to buy over and over again. Once we did that, we put it out to sell the technology, showing the larger companies what they could do if we had these regions, and if they extrapolated that across their entire sales base. So if we did it with 6 sales reps and they have 150, you can see it's a $150 million product line for them. And that's how we sold that.
Okay, so I take my former statement back. You do understand product market fit, because that edging into the market like that is making sure that this price for this service, it has this much want, for the product, et cetera. So that's a classic. Just add a 0 to the sales. How about another 0? Right? And the number gets bigger and bigger because 10 new people add 2 more zeros to it, because and then on and on and on. And that's private equity eats that stuff up, right? Because they just see the pattern and they had to run with it. So it's my last question. It's the first time I've ever asked this, but I think you're the first person to maybe have a hard opinion on this particular thing. So if you could kind of change one thing, whether it's in business or just the world, what would it be? Like if you could just snap your fingers, use your Thanos or whatever, and you could change one thing in whatever area of expertise, life, love, whatever it is, what would it be?
You know what? I would try to instill into the younger generation that we promise you equal opportunity, but we do not promise you equal outcome. And I think we get that confused. As an experiment, when we were winding down our record label, I told all of our employees at the same time, on the same day, the same message. And it was really kind of a social experiment to see how each of them responded to that. And some of them went out and immediately signed on with a major record label. Some of them took a month to process that. And so if I could teach everyone part of this generation is trying so desperately to create equal outcomes, and it's just not possible. You put that out there, and as human beings, you're going to have people that work harder. You're going to have people that ride on someone else's coattails. You're going to have someone that, if you put 4 people in a room and you give them nothing but a blank room, within 2 hours, a leader will emerge out of those 4 people. They all had equal opportunity, right? But they didn't achieve equal outcome. And one of my very idealistic employees was just saying, I just believe that everybody should have the same. There should not be anyone excelling above everybody else. And I said,
like that at all.
I said, well, what she was saying is not that she didn't want to excel, but that the people that were not excelling, it was not their own doing. It was factors outside their control. And my philosophy is that it's absolutely in their control. So I gave her a story. I said, well, you're going in for life-threatening brain surgery, and it's touch and go. I have 3 neurosurgeons who can do the work. Do you want me to put their 3 names in a hat and you pull one out, or would you like me to rank them best to worst? she said, I'll have to get back to you on that.
I bet.
Right.
Pete.
So that was equal opportunity,
Right.
equal outcome. You put them in a hat. But in that particular case, she would like me to go ahead and rank them. So that's kind of where that falls apart. So I guess if I could change anything for that group is that everyone in America is given equal outcome. I put myself through college. Everyone has their own story and background, but it's how hard you want to work at it to achieve your goal. And my goal has never been financial success. It's been accomplishment and achievement, and to take that project to success. And then it's like when I worked for a Catholic healthcare group, one of the nuns told me, it's the best business advice I ever got. She said, Pete, if you remember at the other end of every conversation is a patient in a bed at this hospital, we will be drinking at the bottom of a waterfall with success, meaning there'll be more money than you can count. There'll be more success than we can deal with. But if you put that patient, which is the product, right? It goes for every business. If at the other end of every conversation, you realize that there's a product or there's a patient, or in our case, a patient or cell therapy, then if you take care of the product or the patient, the success takes care of itself.
Pete, we're out of time. It was awesome meeting you, man. Thank you very much for doing this. I'm glad you exist. I really am. I'm glad that people like you exist. I really am.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.